Oh, my stand just came out of the
Oh my god.
Oh, wow.
Pentiment, Grounded, Sea of Thieves, and Hi-Fi Rush coming to PS5 and Switch. Cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. What is going on with Xbox?
It's a shit show.
Is the Series X on track to become a 21st century Dreamcast? Or is this just business as usual for a Microsoft operating in the gaming market of today and not the gaming market of 2004? Is making some of your console exclusive games no longer console exclusive a sign that your games business is about to implode, or a welcome way to chase endless growth on your bottom line that doesn't involve laying thousands of people off, which you've already done?
Job elimination.
People were just being very silly, weren't they? Wasn't it a big old fuss over nothing? Well, that's what me and Sharif and Connor got together to discuss ages ago, but then I got ill, so it's out a bit late. But here you go.
The story of this console generation has been wheel spinning and just constantly spooling up and never quite sort of getting underway. The idea that Starfield and Indiana Jones is like not even out yet, but the idea that these were going to be on PS5, and certain Xbox players felt that would have been a betrayal because they're monumentally stupid people who shouldn't be listened to. But Xbox feels the need to cultivate a really horrible sort of supportive relationship with some very, very annoying kind of professional fans on social media. What we had was a very dry update from a CEO essentially saying, we've had a look at the game catalog. Some of these games are going to go multi-platform because we think they're going to earn us a bit more money if they go multi-platform, and actual console hardware isn't that crucial to the business as it once was, which seems just like a really sensible thing to say. Poor Phil Spencer, his entire job, the entire time he's been in charge of Xbox, has been like just going, don't worry guys, like, I've got this, like, you know, we're not gonna, like, we're getting rid of that HDMI in port that fucking Don Matrick put there, and you know we're gonna make some games and we're gonna buy a bunch of studios, and look, it's fine. And then there was that allusion to, like, we've got a lot of like studios now. We are like, I swear we're making stuff for this fucking thing. Sharif, am I right in thinking that your stance on the Xbox is like, well, I have a PC, so
that's generally my stance. I like their platform. I like the interconnectivity. They talked a lot about that on the show, which is Xbox Play Anywhere, which is basically buying one copy and playing it on Windows and Xbox. Crossplay, cross save. I love the platform. I like a lot more of what the Xbox is as a platform, as a system. I just don't have a reason to own one, if that makes any sense, right? And so I went into this expecting them to just drop the pretense and say, look, our two biggest games are already on every platform, those being Call of Duty and Minecraft.
Yeah.
We don't need to beat around the bush when it comes to Starfield or when it comes to Indiana Jones. Like, Indiana Jones and Starfield are never going to be as big as Call of Duty. So already we are, and Phil Spencer said that outright, we are already one of the biggest third-party publishers on Switch and PlayStation, just by virtue of owning Call of Duty, right? And Minecraft.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't like, you don't need to clutch pearls when someone is going to say like, oh, well, actually Starfield is going to go to PlayStation. But instead it just becomes like them easing their way into it and saying like, well, Starfield is not going to be on other platforms. And it left me a little confused. Like, why? Like, Call of Duty is already on multi-platform. It's almost like they want to have a semblance of giving a shit about the console wars, even as like as they are saying consoles don't matter, guys. Like, in 10 years, console exclusives are not going to be a thing. Like, in the same show that they say, but we're not putting Starfield out on PlayStation.
It's so funny, right? It was just like okay, like, so what we ended up with is just a bunch of older games are going to come to a different platform. So okay, so this is like almost the announcement of, if tomorrow Sony was like, hey everybody, Ghost of Tsushima's coming to PC, everybody would be like, yeah, okay, like, you've brought a bunch of games already to PC, like, we're not, what took you so long? Like, that would be the like, this isn't that thing, the earth shattering. But if Sony were to say like, we're bringing the Uncharted collection to Xbox, that would be unusual, because Sony is not traditionally a third-party publisher. But Xbox,
Like, I do really wonder, are you going to see the Xbox Game Studios logo on this year's Call of Duty? It's pretty plausible, right? So Xbox is already on PlayStation. Minecraft has been on PlayStation for years. So what's the difference?
Phil Spencer was like, he understands why Helldivers 2 isn't on the Xbox Series X and S, but he doesn't see how it benefits players. And it's like, but like, you're doing the same thing for other games.
Exactly.
You're just saying that because like Helldivers 2 seems to be the big thing right now, and so you're like, well, think of the players and everyone. It's like, but if the shoe was on the other foot, you wouldn't do the same. You'd be in that same boat.
Like, for as long as I've been paying attention to gaming news and stuff, like, I think every console generation since the 360 era has been at some point by someone touted as potentially the last. You're not going to have a console after this one, guys, because it's all going to be in the cloud, or, you know, it's just going to be an app on your television. It's going to be on your phone. Like, you know, the early days of the iPhone, people were saying that. Like, nah, like, you know, nobody's making money on big sort of AAA games anymore. The place for a piece of hardware that sits under your television is becoming more and more diminished, and that is a reality, and that's like one of the sensible things that they touched on in this podcast, where they did say, I know they slightly contradicted themselves in other areas, but they did say, well, look, we're always going to have hardware and I think that's more of an accessibility thing now, right? Because you know, it's all very well to be like, hey, you know, you can play, like, you can run Game Pass on your smartphone, or which everyone's got a smartphone, but it's not the nicest experience to play, you know, actual sort of home console games on a screen like that. Or not many people have like a decent PC, right? I mean, that's still quite a niche thing. If you look at the numbers of actual sort of PC players there are who have, like, you know, like cutting edge hardware and stuff like that. It's an accessibility thing to say, like, hey, we got this box and it's £200 or it's $200 or whatever. That's always going to be a factor, because it's about their entire strategy is about like getting as many kind of bums on seats as possible. So that's like, we're uncoupling our game output from the hardware. There isn't any fundamental change to their exclusivity policy. It's always been like this. It's always going to be something that just gets reviewed, and I'm sure that once Starfield is old enough, you know, it'll probably show up on it'll probably, I bet you there'll be like a Game of the Year edition that shows up on PlayStation. I bet you Outer Worlds 2 ends up on PlayStation at some point. That series already has an installed user base.
I think the most confusing takeaway from the whole thing is like the one of like messaging, right? Like, and here's something, after the show, I jumped into a Spaces call on X with one Mr. Tim Dog, one of the Xbox influencers, who was very angry prior to this call. And the sentiment in that call was that he kind of wants Xbox to beat their chest a bit more. And like, you see this sort of very low-key, very corporate. I think they need to maybe be a bit more excitable in pitching this, which is weird when they also came out and were like, we're going to make the biggest technological leap at the next generation. So that is like a big line.
And we're also invested in the next generation roadmap. And what we're really focused on there is delivering the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in a hardware generation.
They've got a foot in each sort of side of, like you said earlier, side of the thing, like, our console's really cool and important, but also like it isn't. And it's like, well, it kind of dissuades you from getting too invested in the idea of buying an Xbox.
They kind of felt tired.
Yeah. They're trying to placate everybody. It's like, no, you should like turn around and calm down.
Yeah.
And then turn this other way and say, no, calm down. It's like, it felt weird.
It was a weird vibe, but you compared it to a funeral.
Yeah, like the way that it was, I mentioned it reminded me of like the Kobe Bryant thing, where it's like everybody on a chair facing the camera, and then just verticals of them talking and then throwing it back and forth to each other. It's just, like you could have just said, unfortunately, like I understand they mentioned this in the show. This was not the plan. Like the plan, they were working on this before the rumors, but the rumors gave this sort of undue heft that they had to basically change the tone of this to say, no, Xbox is going to keep going. Like, we're not
because people were like, oh my God, what's going to happen? My purchases, my hardware, my history, my legacy. And it was never about any of that. It was never about any of that. This could have been just a cute announcement that would have been like, oh, we're bringing Hi-Fi Rush to PlayStation. Isn't that cool? And people would be like, oh, yeah, sure, I guess, whatever. I mean, you have other games. But because of all the rumors on Starfield, is it Halo and Gears of War? And it's like, then it becomes like, okay, we need to set the record straight. But even then, when they did, it was just like the 4 games that were rumored, and they didn't mention anything about Gears. They said specifically Starfield is not going to happen. But also, really, console exclusives, come on, that's not a thing anymore. But we're keeping it for now, so you can shut up and leave us alone. But come on, console exclusives.
Yeah.
If we've shown you anything over the past decade, we're not really big on them. Like, we tried them for a while, didn't work out. We're putting games on PC, so just like get on with it. Like, I don't know.
Nowadays, like, you know, back in the day, like, individual games could be seen as system sellers, right?
Sharif said, altogether, there's a reason to own a PlayStation 5. And maybe, you know, it's right. Maybe exclusivities aren't good for the consumer, but it's good for the Sony consumer.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, right? Because if all of a sudden Sony lost their minds and said, you know what, we're putting Spider-Man on Xbox now. It's a good thing for the PS5 consumer that they have Spider-Man, but is it a good thing for the PS5 consumer that Xbox people don't have Spider-Man? You know, it's like owning a console has to be this sort of zero-sum game, and it's like, I'm an Xbox guy, so I want stuff that other people don't have. Like, I have to feel like I'm getting one over someone, and it's like, or you could just fucking buy the other platform and just play everything. Like,
yeah, I think people do like picking sort of sides and tribes on stuff, right? Be it consoles or muscle cars. Like, oh, I've got Chevy. It's like, cool. I've got a Dodge Charger. Like, people do like comparing their cool toys, right?
Yeah.
And if you're comparing an Xbox to a PlayStation, that's kind of cut and dry. But now the Xbox sort of strategy is like, well, you're comparing a PS5 to an Xbox and a sick gaming PC. But if you got a sick gaming PC, that kind of just trumps everything, right? Right? There's like,
well, I do think these days that, like, it seems like the smart play now is to basically just have a good gaming PC and a Switch.
But it's you playing PlayStation games on PC. You can play the Spider-Man, you just mentioned, on PC. You can play Xbox games on PC, and you can play everything else. So yeah, you're gonna have to wait a little bit, but realistically, though, if you're not in way too deep in this, wait a couple of years for The Last of Us. Wait a couple of years for Horizon. Like, who cares? Like, honestly, who cares? That's the thing. Like, and that's why this whole thing has been disappointing, because they're just like, they're still holding up the pretense of like, no, we still care about exclusives, you guys. We spent all this money, and there was another element that was very strange to me, which is when they said Xbox Game Pass is only going to be on Xbox. Where I was like a little taken aback by that, because you've heard all the reports of them getting closer, and maybe this is ancient history now, but them getting closer to putting Xbox Game Pass on Nintendo Switch. And to me, Xbox Game Pass has always been like a good idea to have on other platforms if the other platform allows it. Like, Ubisoft has a subscription service on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. EA has a subscription service on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. At that point, Microsoft is a third-party publisher, so Sony's going to have maybe a harder time saying no to Xbox Game Pass if they're willing to be treated the same way that EA Play and Ubisoft Plus want to be treated. So at that point, okay, you can just come in with a limited number of games. It's like, okay, forget Halo, forget Gears. This is just for Call of Duty and for Crash, which games that are already on PlayStation. We're not gonna bring. Okay, and then this is just called, like, Game Pass Lite or whatever. Like, what's the difference? What's the difference? Why would you say no to this? So it seemed like a weird. It's almost This whole thing has been like jockeying a bunch of different ideologies in a weird manner, where it's like some element of it is very defensive, it's like protective, and then another element is like very open and forward looking, and
you're right. It's very plate spinning, and it's like and that's what I mean about it being in a bit of the whole industry being in a bit of a transitionary phase. Because like Xbox at the moment, people have talked a lot about its identity crisis. There's been a few articles that have used that specific term recently, and it's right, I think, because it doesn't know what it wants to be, and it's like it's trying to sort of birth a future, but it's not in a position to decide what that future is anymore. It was a long time ago, but they're still a massively wealthy, one of the wealthiest companies on the planet, if not the wealthiest, and massively influential, obviously. But in terms of certainly this specific medium, they're not calling the shots or anything, right? So that they're very much kind of trend followers as much as they are trendsetters. So like, it's trying to give birth to a future, but it still has to exist in the present. And there's a lot of kind of jostling for that. So it doesn't know what it wants to be, and it doesn't know what it can be, I guess. So we're in a bit of an awkward phase. But I guess with gaming, we always are. Like, the landscape is always constantly changing, where, from not even console generations, but for like 1 year to the next, like when a couple of years ago, it felt like we were getting a real big push back into sort of like, single player experiences were being talked up as like, and now it kind of feels like live service isn't going anywhere, and actually single player games are getting cancelled all over the shop. So I don't know. Like,
at the same time, 2023 was a real win for single player, and live service games are closing all over the place. But then, like you said, like right now, it's kind of
it's kind of flipped.
It's so turbulent. It's a really odd time. I think what this podcast video sort of achieved is it kind of kicked the can down the road a bit to that June showcase. They've got announced a June game showcase, and I think that it would be a very good idea for them to put out at least one ace in the hole for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They need to, in my opinion, really, be it a Gears, be it something else that's really sick. They need to really get people excited again about owning an Xbox.
You need to move Fable up, man. I think the shaking his head like nobody gives a fuck about Fable.
No, it's not. No, some people do. It's just like they realize, they feel like with Starfield that they're not going to make their Last of Us, and they're not going to make their Uncharted. So just stop trying. Make a bunch of things that have smaller impacts everywhere, like a Hi-Fi Rush or a Pentiment, like very unique experiences, and somewhat big games and shooters and this and that. But they're never going to have the tentpole thing that everyone stops and just looks at and pays attention to it for the entire week.
Fable was never that, really. Yeah.
And it was never that. And you want to turn Perfect Dark into that, and that's probably going to come out in 2030, or we're all dead, or some crazy thing. What game? Hellblade is not that. They specifically said it's a shorter experience. That's a sequel to the first game, so it's not.
It's an artsy sale. Hellblade's sick, but it's not the sort of thing you shake an
Indiana
industry
Jones
with.
is just like what game do they have that it can stack up? And I'm saying that as someone who isn't a super fan of those Sony games, but you have to understand the prestige that these games bring is what is the value of PlayStation. And
that's
they
the
realize
word, isn't it? It's the prestige. It
doesn't matter if you like them or not. It's HBO. So I don't like anything on HBO. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can still enjoy the CW, but
even the sick stuff.
Like it doesn't matter. Like genuinely, it doesn't matter. Like if it's seen as expensive and prestige, that's why people pay 4 times for Boss, Ego Boss or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like it's made in the same sweatshop in Bangladesh. It doesn't matter. Like,
I love that comparison. I love the idea that like Sony is HBO and Microsoft is the CW. I love that.
They're trying, but seriously,
they're trying, and you can kind of see where they're going with it. And for some reason, there's loads of people who love this shit, and they're in forums kicking off all the time. But people
loved Arrow and Vampire Hunters and whatever.
It's especially good when you realize that the Last of Us show was literally is a HBO show adapted from a Sony prestige game.
Exactly, they're already in the same circles. Like that game has already. Everyone is like, "Oh my god, I can't believe it translated so well." And I was like, "That game is a TV show, 70% a TV show already." Like what? Why are you surprised?
It's fucking cutscenes and ladders and shit.
Right? Like what are you doing? So I think they should have just come out and said, like, "Look, man,
we're just going to have like maybe a year. And they said, like, they sort of hinted that this is going to happen in the future by saying, like, we're going to learn, we're going to watch and see the reaction. Maybe they look at the sales and they're not happy with it. They're like, oh, this is not worth it for us. Let's just keep the mystery. But I think there is value in putting your games everywhere, even if to advertise to future sequels. Like if you put the Gears of War games, if you put the Halo games there, and then when the next Halo comes out, and you're like, well, I don't know when it's going to come to PlayStation, you have a built-in audience on PlayStation who's like, well, I played those Halo games on the last console. I think I might consider buying this game on PC or buying an Xbox. So it works as sort of advertisement for it. But in the same way that God of War, if you play God of War 2018 on PC, you could say when Ragnarok came out, you're like, well, I need to know what happens in Ragnarok. I'm not gonna wait for the PC version in 2025 or whatever. I need to get a PS5 now. Right, so do that. Like it's fine. Put everything out. Everything. If we can't have the perfect future of everything on everything, at least like get the ball rolling. But this felt like,
I suppose there's like a halfway house where everything's a timed exclusive instead. No, that makes a lot of sense actually. You know, and I know that there are people, especially with the cheaper hardware, with the Series S. The Series S gets so much stick, but I know a lot of people who aren't Xbox people at all, but who have a Series S because they're like, well, you know, I feel I like having a console to play that sort of stuff on. You know,
there was a wild stat, wasn't there, about like the percentage of Xbox current gen Xbox users who used an S. It was wild.
Well,
it was like overwhelming.
It was like a perfect sort of second console, which I think is maybe that's where Microsoft are. That's where they kind of want to sit. Where like we're not anyone's favorite, but we make a lot of stuff that people like. You know, we're the perfect like second console people. Where like you know everyone has got access if they want to a cloud-based Xbox. You can just get on Game Pass and play our, you know, so like, yeah, that I guess that's where like we're not the Prestige, we're not Nintendo, we're this secret third thing. So and it feels. I tell you what as well. How I think we'll wrap up after this point, but
sure.
The We've been talking a lot recently, just sort of, you know, on VG247 internally about how the gaming industry, it feels like it's heading for some kind of reckoning, some kind of big video game crash again, because none of it feels sustainable.
Oh, God. Yeah.
You know, I don't want to get in. That's probably its whole other show itself. But like, Sharif, you're talking about like, you know, Microsoft should focus on making like these smaller experiences, not things that have like budgets in the hundreds of millions, but like, you know, budgets in the sort of tens of millions sort of thing. Like smaller experiences. Avowed seems like exactly that kind of game, right? It's a great kind of Skyrim-esque RPG, but it's on a smaller scale by a really good studio, so they're leveraging that talent, and that is probably going to do quite well for them in terms of like getting bums on seats. It's probably going to sell quite well, and I can't imagine it's going to have the budget of something like Starfield. So, you know, it'll be easier returns that way. I feel like that's where a lot of the industry has to head anyway, because I think like it's not very sustainable to be an indie developer because you can't get the discoverability, and essentially, unless you have some sort of like, you know, PewDiePie plays your game and then 100 million people buy it like overnight, like, you know, Among Us or something, you have some wild overnight success that just can't be planned for or matched. Like making indie games is a really hard business that most people just fail at financially because the numbers just don't make sense. And also, trying to make big AAA experiences, unless you're Sony and unless, as you say, you have that prestige niche kind of locked down, it's just not sustainable because, like, you know, you'll spend hundreds of millions on something and nobody will ever play it. There's this kind of the B tier game, the smaller project that scratches a lot of those boxes. It's well funded, but it doesn't need to make $1 billion just to make its money back. If Microsoft are sitting themselves right exactly there, I think that's probably a good thing generally for the business.
Sure, but I think Sony will be fine. Yeah, if a crash happens. because they have all that prestige stuff, and they kind of
they don't need to. They do. This is like, it's fine. You don't have to copy Sony. Like, look at Nintendo. Like, Nintendo does its own thing, makes games mostly for children. This is not an insult. I swear to God, it's fine to like games made for children, but it's okay. But you need to recognize that they're made for children, right? That's just the thing. So no one goes to Nintendo and says, "Where's your Last of Us? Where's your sad dad game in a third-person perspective?" No one does that. No one does that. In the same way, no one comes to PlayStation and says, "Where's your family game? Where's your 2D platformer?" No one cares. Like there's an audience that looks for this stuff, and they're over there, and there's an audience that looks for something different, and they're over here. So Xbox, I feel like still has the look of like, but we could have like the thing, but they try and they try and they try, and then they don't. So, okay, make a bunch of like, what's the opposite of death by 1,000 cuts? Like, charmed by 1,000 flowers or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just give me like, a bunch of things like, Pentiment. That's a game that literally doesn't exist anywhere else. Like, but it's so niche that it could not be anywhere else even, right? And then you have a game that's very cerebral, like Psychonauts 2. And then you have big-ish games, Starfield. Again, not a massive thing. And then you have games about psychosis that are super high in production values, like Hellblade 2. Like, it's a collection of a bunch of interesting things that you're like, you know what, this is a good lineup of games. Any of them individually a prestige thing? No. Collectively, yes, they're interesting. Stop chasing the Sony stuff. Stop chasing the whatever. You have good multiplayer games. You have good, interesting. Again, Sea of Thieves, very slight in my opinion. But it's an engaging game that has its fans that, but this is what I mean. Like, just, make a bunch of interesting things that make money and are sustainable, and stop chasing the quadruple A, triple A games that take 6 years to make and then come out and everyone says, well, it's not as good as The Last of Us. And then they just move on. Like, I genuinely think this is what, not to doom and gloom early, but like Perfect Dark, it's been in development so long and changed hands so many times. There's no way that game is going to be the thing. Does anyone
give a shit about it anymore as well? Like, the last Perfect Dark game was fucking terrible anyway. Like, I'm sure there's some people like in their mid-40s who have fond memories of the N64 because they haven't had to use one for like 30 years. Yeah. That is a terrible machine and always was. But like, it's weird that anything is riding on a Perfect Dark game.
Well, they needed to dig up some IP that was theirs and was known.
Yeah,
like list out all the good Xbox IP, and then tell me right now how the IP is doing.
Okay,
all the IPs,
like all the big ones. Where?
Big Xbox. So Gears of War is basically fucked. Nobody cares. Halo.
I like Gears like a multiplayer, but it's unavoidable that people turn off narratively.
It's just they're not what you used to be. I
liked Gears 5.
I love Gears 5 and 4.
Who talks about it?
Exactly.
It's not us being disparaging. It's just the reality of it. Like, I know. Although I do know a lot of Halo fans who just thought Infinite was just penis. Like,
apparently better now, but definitely landed below expectations.
Yeah, it's all riding on Fable for me.
Forza didn't hit. The last one didn't hit, but Horizon is massive.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing about Forza Motorsport is that everyone likes Horizon.
Yeah.
And they'd actually tried to make Motorsport a bit more Horizon-y, and at that point, you're like, well, why have you got two strands?
A bunch of their stuff has been dormant. Fable has been dormant. I can't really no. It's been long enough that it could be either way. Like, could be like
they've got all this dormant stuff. Yeah, they just so Perfect Dark is them digging up some of that dormant IP, and then I guess just floundering with it and fumbling it.
But you know what? It's just occurred to me. You talking about like, don't try to be HBO and have all these kind of prestige things going on. Just to have like a mix of like really interesting stuff and make that your niche. Well, A24, right? Mm-hmm. The independent film company, bunch of not franchises, but just like, but people know that when they see the A24 logo, oh, well, this is going to be interesting at least. They're good at picking scripts to develop, right? So I think that's probably where they sit.
Although this is not the best example, because A24 literally just recently said they're going to focus more on more mass appeal.
They
stuff.
did do that.
Oh, fuck.
So they specifically just said they're not going to abandon their weird stuff, but they caught a couple of hits, a couple of misses. I want to say. like Beau's Afraid and a bunch of the things that came out last year, that they were like, okay, we can't have all of it be weird. Let's have something that's a little bit easy to explain to someone on like the ride home.
Yeah. Like, what was that one called? The Green Knight, was it?
The Green Knight was fine.
I love the Green Knight, but how do you explain that to your granny? Like,
I think the closest they got to something that was like mass appeal was like, what was it called? The Norseman or something? That was sick. The Viking one.
Oh yeah.
That was rad as out.
I think that bombed,
but that was a bomb.
Yeah, big bomb as well.
Yeah. I tried watching Beau's Afraid on the airplane, and I was just like,
but Microsoft should make a bunch of cool shit that bombs because they can afford it. Like,
but yeah, that's never going to happen because the you know why? Because like Phil Spencer kind of like spilled the beans on this thing in a way that I just found fascinating when he said, if the industry is not growing, we're going to have to lay people off. Because like he basically was like, no, I'm not like your friend here. This is capitalist society, and the only metric that we care about is growth, not sustainability, not profitability. It's growth. It's an industry that didn't grow, and that's why you saw the layoffs. Regardless of all the great games, that's the fallacies that we have to maintain.
That's just what I find so baffling.
So it doesn't matter what you know.
Do we not know by now that it's like chasing endless? I mean, a 5-year-old can tell you that endless growth is like an oxymoron.
That's right. You have to find new players or over monetize the players that you have. That's literally what he said.
Yeah, he literally did say that.
He's trying to find new players.
He was. In fairness to him, there was a lot of waffle, kind of corporate waffle in this, but he was being uncharacteristically honest in a lot of ways, because he was literally like, well, we either crib a bunch of PlayStation players or we start rinsing you guys for like even more cash. We put like Game Pass goes up to 70 quid a month. Like, we start shaking you down.
And you look at the Sony leaks, like the Insomniac leaks, there were literally emails and consideration in that thing that suggest that Sony wants to raise the price of their games again and again and again, because the audience is not growing on at the pace that they want, and the games are getting significantly more expensive.
Yeah, Marvel Spider-Man 2,
Sony's
award-winning, beloved game.
One of the strategy, exactly. So
we didn't make enough money back to warrant that sort of development, which is like.
Well, this is why I think making smaller games is, the way that the industry probably in general needs to go, because which is interesting, because another thing they said, I think we touched on it earlier, but the next hardware generation of Xbox promises to be the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in a hardware generation. I think that was the exact words of Sarah Bond.
Yes,
is it her name?
Yes,
yeah.
She's in charge of the hardware development side of things.
No, she's for Xbox now.
Head of Xbox.
And it's just like, I can't imagine that possibly being true, because I've lived through a lot of technical leaps, and I can fucking tell you that the 16-bit to 32-bit one has never been. There is no larger gulf than that, because like that went from Sonic the Hedgehog to fucking guys with like, walking around in rooms with heads, it's not comparable. But
and it also makes me wonder how much that console is going to cost.
How much is the console going to cost? But how much is it going to cost to make all this ultra photorealistic stuff?
It has to cost. Yeah. It's going to cost a lot to buy if it is going to be a massive thing. And it has to sell a lot of consoles. It's like, geez,
you either leverage AI to generate just soulless shit that nobody wants to play, or you actually can't make the economics of that work, because developing one sort of AAA game to that sort of standard will cost $500 million, and it will never make that money back.
Maybe that's their massive generational leap feature, is that they think that by that point their investment in OpenAI will have paid off. So they're going to have some sort of like AI accelerated cores on their GPU or something, and the tech will be good enough that they can make something out of it. So
they just have to pay one guy $5 an hour to go up to a computer and type "Last of Us" but on Xbox.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only way they can get "Last of Us" on Xbox, just to have AI strong enough to ape it.
All right. Okay. Well, I think we'll leave it there. But sort of what a weird kind of almost funeral-like atmosphere for the past, I think, everything up to this point. In some ways, it was a bit of a harbinger for big changes in the industry to come. In other ways, it was really just reassurance that actually nothing's changed, guys. Like, we were always doing this shit. Like,
it's fine for
Minecraft's
now.
on everything.
Yeah. Right now, it's okay. Yeah.
Sometimes I feel bad for Phil Spencer because, like, his entire job is just to reassure dickheads on Twitter that, you know, the £500 box they purchased is still going to work in the morning. You don't have to kick off. It's fine. And he must go to bed every night. Like, why are we engaging with these fucking people? But, you know, you cultivate that sort of professional fanboy audience, and then that's the sort of shit you're going to have to deal with, right? Anyway, all right. Thank you very much for watching or listening, etc. Please leave a comment. Tell us what you... Oh, fuck. I've just thrown my mobile phone.
There you go.
Tell us what you think, because we're definitely interested in that.
Everybody said,
Bye.
Jim, you're right. Jim, you're right. Jim, you're right. I started talking about
Big the Cat.
and how he's no good, and everybody said, Jim, you're right. Jim, you're right. Jim, you're right. Jim, you're right. I started talking about
Xbox
and how he's no good, and everybody said, Jim, you're right. Jim, you're right. Jim, you're right. Jim, you're
wrong.